A very warm welcome to the show. This is EI Cafe with Azeem, Season 4. I'm your host, mazeemsaheer, a human capital specialist, a Lego Serious Play facilitator, ICF certified coach, and emotional intelligence practitioner. Here we are again for another interesting episode, a 30 minutes of valuable learning. So you heard the introduction, and we are going to talk about today about the power of divergent thinking, especially in terms of leadership and in terms of management in an organizational context. To discuss this, I have one of my very good colleague all the way from UK. Let me introduce him. He's a founder of ProMeet, an award-winning international facilitation business and serious work, which provide facilitator training for the Lego Serious Play methodology. He's authored many books related to this, and currently he is on the process of writing his fourth book. Quote, he says, I facilitate outcomes, not meetings. I train facilitators, not processes. Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome Sean Blair, founder at Serious Work.
Well, thank you for that.
Sean, welcome.
I didn't realize we had an audience of 1,000 people clapping in the background.
It's the power of divergent thinking, Sean.
Or the power of your brilliant audio skills, probably.
All right.
Anyway,
awesome.
Lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. First and foremost, thank you very much, Sean, for accepting my invitation and joining on a busy schedule to record this 30 minutes of the podcast. Sean, you heard the topic. We are going to talk about a little bit divergent thinking. We're going to deep dive into a little bit of play as well. Now, this has become an important element in today's context, especially with the current pandemic going on. A lot of businesses are struggling. They cannot have the same way of doing things again and again. They need to really move on. We have been talking about a lot of convergent thinking, but the power of divergent thinking, I think, can take us many more years ahead of what we are now. So in that context, Sean, my first question is for you is, if you can really elaborate for us, what is divergent thinking for the benefit of our listeners who will not be knowing some of the words, and how it related to creativity?
Great. Well, I'll try. So let's just try and define what I define divergent thinking as. I trained originally as an industrial designer. And so the first thing that my mind thinks about is the process of imagining different possibilities and different options. So divergent thinking is a cognitive process. It may also be a sort of a creative process embodied through drawing or writing or typing or writing code. Of imagining new possibilities. So you could almost say that divergent thinking is a bit like design thinking. It's a design process. So that's how I think of divergent thinking. And often it is followed by some convergent thinking. So to imagine a range of different options and possibilities, and then to look at all of the different possibilities to make some choices and converge upon, let's call it, a solution. How does that relate to your understanding of what divergent thinking is, Azeem? You're on mute. I can't hear you.
Thank you. So my thought process will be in terms of, I really like that convergent thinking follows when we have the divergent thinking. Now, I want to really clarify, if the convergent thinking really follows, where does the creativity come into place? Which area it is really occur?
I mean, I think creativity can be in every single part of the process, from the creativity to even imagine the challenge differently. Mm-hmm. I mean, the second thing which I thought about when you introduced the topic is an example of a company who has been amazing at divergent thinking. Let's think about Tesla, the electric car company. Their divergent thinking has revolutionized the automotive industry. And Elon Musk, I think, driven by a set of environmental concerns, used his own, and many other engineers and creative people used his own divergent thinking to imagine a radically different possibility for how cars would be powered in the future. And so, and then the process of imagining, designing, bringing to market, setting up a whole production distribution system and delivering a new type of electric car requires creativity at so many points. So I think creativity is a bit like a sort of a thread running through everything from the initial conception, which presumably he had in his mind. Well,
and I would like to add on that you talk about SpaceX, right?
absolutely.
We never thought that it will be a private entity, an individual taking people to the space, to the space station, and at the same time, like Jeff Bezos or Richard Branson taking into tourism. So it's really amazing to see that how much of these people have the focus area of divergent thinking. It's really interesting. Sean, I really want to ask this. What would be the benefit for organization in terms of developing a divergent thinking as a skill for their employees, especially in today's context?
I mean, I think ultimately the benefit could be survival. There's nothing to say that companies will live a long time. Many companies do not live a long time. Many corporations don't last, more than 10 years. Some don't last more than 100 years. A 100-year-old corporation is a very, very old entity indeed. So at the sort of the strategic level, the benefit of divergent thinking is ultimately survival. I mean, another good example might be Nokia. So when we were sort of wandering around the place 15 years ago, many of us were using Nokia mobile phones. The kind of divergent thinking that Apple introduced with the iPhone kind of killed Nokia's telephone business dead. So that's an example of the big benefit of divergent thinking. I think there's another really critical component, actually. It feels to me, certainly here in Europe, as though people are really waking up to the climate change event that many people have known about for decades. And so I think we're entering a phase where divergent thinking is an absolute requirement for organizations to adapt to a world where carbon emissions and climate change is becoming far more real for people. I mean, another just tiny quick example would be, I think, COVID. COVID comes along 18 months ago, and many organizations, my own included, had to pivot. And how do we do that? Well, we do that through divergent thinking, imagining new possibilities and new ways of working. So I think divergent thinking is a sort of a strategy for survival in many ways, as well as an ability to innovate, come up with new products, new services, new ways of adding value, new ways of being.
I think here what I would really want to ask you now is divergent thinking is related only for research and development units in an organization, or is it responsible for all the employees in an organization to come up with different aspects in terms of their products or services?
In my opinion, divergent thinking is relevant at all levels, in all activities, at all places. It's the extent to which divergent thinking thrives is probably related to the leadership capability and the culture of an organization. Some organizations are better at unlocking that and allowing it than others. I think an organization that thinks divergent thinking is only the R&D department's job, well, they're probably in trouble, would be my guess.
Yeah, so I think that's the most of the organization, because when people ask for the workshops or a skill development program, they talked about creativity and innovation, and they bring the cross-function people in and they said, why we have to do it? It's about R&D. Then when we go through the whole process, they really understand this divergent thinking and the creativity can be the survival for them in the business. Otherwise, they'll be good, like what you said, like Nokia. is no more in terms of mobile industry.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with that. History is littered with stories of organizations who have been overwhelmed by competitors. I mean, I think many academics that study strategy argue that many strategy projects fail, either because the strategy imagined at the outset was poor or flawed or not innovative or imaginative enough, or the ability to implement it was flawed. I've heard one statistic which says that 98% of strategy projects fail. Is there a relationship between that and the lack of divergent thinking? I would argue yes.
Absolutely spot on. Thank you for sharing, Sean, on that. Here's the interesting part coming in. Now, you have been facilitating and training people to become facilitators on Lego Serious Play. Now, how Lego Serious Play can bring this capability of divergent thinking? Does it really evolve with this particular technique? How does organization can really benefit out of this particular methodology in terms of building divergent thinking or building strategies to become very unique in the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that's worth saying is Lego Serious Play is just a communication method, in my opinion. Just like a Post-it note is a communication method, a Lego model is another way of communicating an idea, and that can be done imaginatively and creatively, or it can be done without imagination. It can be done poorly. So there's nothing to guarantee that just because you're communicating via Lego bricks, you will be creative and divergent. I think there's a skill in a professionally designed workshop to help people use the bricks in a way that will trigger creativity and divergent thinking. And we would call that being clear upon the objectives and the outcomes we're trying to create, and then to design the right kind of build questions. You know, what are we asking people to explore in the bricks? Having said that, the fact that it is a child's toy, and it can be a playful process, the act of play and being playful, I think, is a really wonderful trigger for creative thinking and triggering imagination. So there is something probably inherently more creative about a Lego brick than a Post-it note. But there's nothing to guarantee that just because we're using Lego bricks, you will guarantee to get, you know, innovative thinking. That's kind of down to the skill of the session design and the facilitation, I would say.
So here, what I think about in that particular element, because I've done a couple of, you know, some sort of a workshops on Lego. People, when they have fun, a lot of fun with this element. And when I ask, when did you last touch a, you know, Lego brick, they say like ages, we don't remember. And then they become really enjoying that moment. And Sean, you need to see, like, they come up with some fantastic ideas without them knowing. Unconsciously, they come up with the great ideas and they start working on. I have a couple of clients who have been come back and they've been given some testimonials to me. This has worked a lot. People are really build certain methodologies, framework, and they start working on it based on the workshop. So I always believe that having fun can create more divergent thinking. That's my whole belief system is a bit. What do you think?
Yes, I agree. And actually, another thing that you said, I think, is worth just kind of highlighting. One of the things that's great about asking groups to imagine ideas through building models of them is they activate 3 modes of communication. In most meetings, there are primarily auditory communication as people talk to each other. Sometimes a little bit of visual communication if people write things down. In Lego Serious Play, it's 3 things. It's auditory, it's visual, and it's kinesthetic. And when we combine those 3 modes of communication, it makes the results of the workshops far more memorable. People can remember the ideas because they've heard them, they've seen them, and they've seen them animated and moved. So I think those 3 modes of communication are another benefit of the Lego Serious Play method.
Fantastic. John, I want to ask you this. I don't know whether you have experience. Have any of your have you been working with any organizations, especially on building strategies? Because even in the introduction says strategies plays a vital role in the organization to keep running. Two part. One is to build the strategy with Lego Serious Play. One is to communicate the strategy to the lower part of the organization, because they are the execution part. Because most of the organization fail to, execute the planned strategies, because the reason being the lower part has not been communicated effectively. How do you take this particular element?
Yes, I've had quite a lot of experience of that. Let's just clarify some terms though first. So my definition of strategy is a logic by which you might implement, let's something like a vision. So generally, we would help an organization get clear upon what does success in the future look like? Who do they want to become? So we might call that a vision or an identity. And then the strategy is how we will achieve that. So it's very common for me to work with clients to help them imagine what the future would look like through something like a vision workshop. And we may build that model in Lego. To pick up upon your second point about how's that communicated, I did a piece of work with a bank in Washington, DC. It was a strategy workshop. So I did a 2-day session with 11 people, the leadership team, and they built a Lego model of what success looked like for them in 12 months' time. The next week, they stood on stage in front of 150 people, and they shared the story of what they had built using a live camera to everyone in the audience to communicate their view of what success looked like. And then everybody in the audience, the 150 people, they built Lego models to interpret what the vision meant to them. So we used it to both imagine the future and communicate it to everybody affected by that future.
Fantastic. That's why I love this particular methodology, because it's easy for people to really want to understand, and other people to like make sure that they understood what we have communicated. Thank you for sharing, Sean, on that.
My pleasure.
And then the next question I really want to ask is now, why it is important to adapt this particular divergent thinking by leaders and the management, because as a top level people, what would be your take?
I mean, I think it picks up upon some of the threads that we've spoken about already.
Yeah.
The leaders are generally responsible for the strategy direction of an organization. If they don't adopt divergent and creative thinking, then they're likely to be sort of stuck in the old ways of doing things. No organization stands still. Organizations are constantly adapting and innovating. So if it's not a leadership competency, if leaders themselves don't have the ability to adapt, I mean, let's again use COVID as an example.
Yeah.
There will be organizations in the last 18 months who have thrived through COVID, and there will be other organizations who have not thrived. And probably the main difference is the ability to adapt. In our case, pre-COVID, all of our workshops and trainings were face-to-face. Lego is a very face-to-face kind of process. COVID comes along, and we adapted. We sort of said, how do we do this online? And we created some new techniques. And now we very successfully run online workshops for global organizations in multiple time zones, doing something that wasn't possible before online Lego Serious Play came along. So that's a good example of an adaptation that we've made in our own business that has allowed us in many ways to create some new products and services, and we've thrived through COVID.
I always believe that crises are the best moment or best time to really be innovative and reinvent the way we think, and that divergent thinking part comes into play. So that's really awesome. Thank you, Sean, for sharing that as well. So Sean, here's my last element I wanted from you, and there'll be listeners who's listening from more than 45 countries. I wanted to know if you can give a small couple of nuggets. How can people really, come up thinking about divergent thinking, can they practice in their personal life or even an organizing context? What would be a couple of things they can practice in terms of practicality?
I think that's the hardest question you've asked me today. So let me make sure I understand it. Your question is, what are some sort of small tips
Yes.
that I could offer people for how they might practice divergent thinking? I would say inspire yourself. Do something you've never done before. We learn so much from new activities, read a book you've never read before, go to a cultural event you've never gone to before, have a conversation with somebody you've never had a conversation with before, make something you've never made before. Silly example, I took up woodwork in lockdown, and I learned a lot about learning from mistakes through trying to make things in wood. And I sort of learned that mistakes are really the best teacher. Every time I made a mistake, I learned something new. So the act of doing woodwork for the first time in many years helped me learn about mistakes as teachers. And that learning is useful in all parts of my life. So that would be my tip. Do something you've never done before.
Absolutely. I think failure is the first teacher, as you said, the mistake is the first teacher. And we need to fail fast, especially in this context.
Well, we need to learn fast.
Is it? All right.
Well, you can fail fast, but not learning from failing fast is different to failing fast and learning from it. So we need to learn fast.
Learn as well. So my context, what I was trying to bring is when you fail fast, don't take time to learn from it. So learn as quickly as possible and get on top and become the resilient person and start thriving. So Sean, thank you very much. So that's the time that we have, ladies and gentlemen. Today, my key takeaway is the last bit, what Sean shared. Try something you have not tried. That will help your mind to become more broad, more divergent thinking personality. That will help you to build new skills, adapt to the changes. I think there are a lot of benefits. I think our listeners have plenty of takeaway today from this particular episode. My sincere thanks to Sean Blair, founder at Serious Work, and you can get connected via his social media platform, and you can Google his website also, which you can know more about how to facilitate and know about Lego Serious Play. And he have written some 3 amazing books. I think 4th on the way, Sean.
That's right.
Yeah. So and the books are available on Amazon, and you can just Google through it and you will be able to get it. So once again, Sean, thank you very much for your valuable time you spend with me in the cafe and inspiring people to understand the power of divergent thinking.
Well, Azeem, thank you for inviting me to come and talk to you. I've really enjoyed that rich conversation. You've come up with some brilliant questions and made me think too. So it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Sean.